The morning they hammered the last nail into cabin 23, I sat on my porch with my father's old coffee mug and a camera I never wanted to use. The wind carried the smell of sawdust and lake water. I could hear the hammers, the generators, and the laughter of strangers who thought they belonged here, and I let them build every inch of it. Every board, every fake, rustic light fixture. I let them finish because sometimes you need to let the whole mess unfold before justice can see it for what it really is. Now, that might sound cold, but to understand, you've got to know this little island in the middle of Cedar Glass Lake isn't just land to me. It's my family's story. My dad taught me to swim off that shallow shelf. My mom carved our initials under the dock when I was 9. We buried my father's hat there the day his old flag grew to faded to fly. That island is the last thing I own that hasn't tried to own me back. The HOA didn't see it that way. To them, it was an underutilized amenity. That's what the new board president called it in her meeting crisp blouse. Crisp voice, clicking through her slideshow like she was selling condos instead of erasing history. Phase 2. Lakeside expansion. 23 short-term rental cabins. Members-only shuttle. New revenue stream. She pointed at a shaded polygon on her map, and there it was, my island outlined like a coin in someone else's pocket. I stood up and said, "That island isn't in your polygon. It's mine." "The plat shows it within our boundary, sir." "The county GIS does," I said, "but the deed doesn't." The room went quiet, except for a couple of sighs and an eye roll. One neighbor whispered, "Here he goes again." "Oh." I wanted to shout, but I didn't. My father always said, "The man who keeps his voice usually keeps his land." A week later, the notices started rolling in. Common area improvement access. Temporary construction staging. Then fines because I dared to anchor my boat on the same side I'd used since high school. They even taped a bright orange violation to my cedar fence, the one my dad and I set post by post. That paper snapped in the wind like a dare. My wife asked if we should hire security. I just poured another cup of coffee and said, "No, we're hiring a surveyor. Then a historian, and if we have two, a judge." So I started collecting proof. At dawn, I took pictures. I logged every barge run, every generator, every pile of lumber they ferried out. I saved every smug email about how my boat interfered with community objectives, and I paid the tax bill that's still listed. Parcel, island tract, title, private, just like it had since 1949. Then I started asking around, old man. Reddick at the bait shop remembered when my grandfather ferried hog wire across the lake to fence off the cattails. He pulled a dusty box from under the counter maps from the 1960s. "Your granddad bought that island after the war," he said. Said land keeps you honest. He handed me a brittle map with my family name penciled in neat. Handwriting, Lawson. The surveyor I hired was an old-school craftsman. He read the deed out loud, like poetry, commencing at the white oak on the northern spit, following the course of the water as it bends, including accretions. He looked up at me and smiled. "They don't write 'em like this anymore." He showed me how the HOA's plat was based on a lazy radius and insurance outline, not a legal one. "GIS is a guess," he said. "A deed is a promise." But while we were proving it, they kept building. Cabins sprouted like mushrooms after rain. Tourists came early posing under string lights. I could see flickering from my porch at midnight. It took everything in me not to lose it. One afternoon, I pulled my father's folded flag from the shelf and pressed it to my chest just to keep my hands from doing something I'd regret. I could almost hear him whisper, "Measure twice, cut once, and if you have to cut, make it clean." Then one day, a sheriff's deputy showed up. Said he was advising me not to access the island amenity without a wristband. I didn't argue. I just handed him a document in a plastic sleeve. "This is the deed," I said. "April 7th, 1949, my grandfather's name, my island." He read it carefully, nodded and said, "Sir, I'm going to stay out of your civil matter." That was all I needed to hear. The next week, I got a letter from the HOA's lawyer. Cease and desist, trespass upon community property. I pinned it right next to my dad's hat on the corkboard. My lawyer, a quiet woman who used to clerk for property rights. Judge gave me two choices. Stop them now with an injunction, or let them finish and show the court the full extent of the damage. Injunction puts a bandage on a wound they'll deny exists, she said. Letting them finish shows the cut. So I waited. It was like watching a storm roll in, knowing it'd break a few branches but clear the air. When the last porch swing went up on cabin 23, I called her. "File it," I said. Court day came with rain. I wore my father's watch. The HOA president showed up with pearls and confidence. Their lawyer presented glossy photos, maps, and his favorite line, "The island has always been part of the community boundary. We merely improved it." "Proved it," I muttered under my breath. Then my lawyer stood. Calm, steady. She started with the basic stacks, bills, old receipts, and a title chain older than anyone in that courtroom. When she was done, she nodded at me. I took the stand with the deed in my hand. "This is my grandfather's," I said. "Recorded April 7th, 1949. It describes the island as its own tract. We've paid taxes, posted signs, and maintained the dock every single year. The only time they ever used it was a canoe race in 1998. I signed that permission myself." The HOA's lawyer tried to interrupt. The judge waved him off. Then my lawyer produced one last piece, a 1972 court order confirming our boundary line and accretions. The judge read it twice, then asked the HOA's lawyer if he had anything comparable. He didn't. Expectation doesn't hold weight like ink. When my lawyer showed the judge, the photos 23 cabins, foundations, generators, all time-stamped, and geotagged, she said quietly, "This is not community improvement. This is trespass," the HOA president snapped. "He let us do it." He watched us. The judge leaned back and said, "Ma'am, that's not consent. That's damages." He ruled right there. Title confirmed. Cease and desist effective immediately. 90 days to remove all structures and restore the island. Full damages and legal fees awarded, and then he suggested the HOA consider new leadership with a better grasp of property law. I didn't celebrate. I just exhaled. When I stepped outside, the rain had stopped. The lake was perfectly still, like it had been holding its breath for this moment. Over the next few weeks, cabins came down one by one. Barges reversed. Lumber piled up like guilt. Volunteers I hadn't seen in months showed up with sandwiches and kind words. Even a contractor shook my hand and said, "We take the jobs we're given." Didn't know the story behind it. When it was all gone, I went back to the island with my wife. We set a new cedar pole at the center and raised a fresh flag knot. My father's old one. But one he would have been proud to see, she cried. I did too. I planted 3 young cedars on the west edge, right where their cabins had stood. Then I built a bench and carved a small plaque. Measure twice, cut once. Keep your promise. Under the dock, I found the initials my mother carved half a century ago. The lines were faint, but still they're just like us. The lake is calm again. And for the first time in years, so am I. THOA has new leadership now. Some of them even brought a pie and an apology. I accepted both. We still wave on trash day. You can hold your line and still hold your peace. Do I regret letting them finish? Not one bit. When the judge saw what they'd built, he saw the truth with both eyes open. Paper beat politics. Patience beat noise. And a promise made before I was born stood its ground when it mattered most. Land doesn't just belong to you, you belong to it. If you inherit something worth standing for, protect it. Quietly when you can. Loudly when you must. Have you ever faced an HOA like this? Share your story in the comments. I read every one. And if you believe some fights are worth having, hit subscribe, and let's stand up together.